Creating cameras is similar to creating lights. There are two types that ship out of the box, target and free. And there are additional types if you have V-Ray installed. But I'll just be talking about the standard cameras here. I'll start by creating a free camera by clicking in the front viewport. The camera faces forward in this viewport, and you can see it here in the top viewport. If I create a camera in the top viewport by clicking, it also faces forward with respect to this viewport, so that the camera is facing downwards in world space. So it's important that you select which viewport you want to start with when you're adding a camera. Typically that would be left or front if you want your camera to be facing horizontally. Now, creating a target camera works a bit differently. You drag from the camera to the target, and this camera will be on the ground plane because that's the active grid. You can see that over here in the front viewport. So it's necessary to move the camera and its target up. If I move this camera up, observe that it's always pointing at its target, so this is actually angling the camera down. I would have to also move the target up if I wanted the camera to be more horizontal. It doesn't really matter which type you start with because you can convert the camera's type later on. Notice that there are no parameters for the target. It's merely a dummy object linked to the camera. I'll select the camera and change its type. Now it's a free camera. I can rotate a free camera to reorient it. But you cannot rotate a target camera because it remains linked to the target, and therefore changing the orientation requires that you actually move the target. Look through a camera by right-clicking on a viewport label and selecting it from the top of the list. Alternatively, you can press C to do that. I'll press P to go back to perspective, and notice that we're looking through the same perspective here that we were looking through a moment ago when we were viewing through the camera. So this is an interesting way to change your perspective. If you create multiple cameras, you can look through the appropriate camera, and then perhaps I will navigate this a bit, and I will press P to go back to perspective, and I start my perspective from this vantage point, so I can orbit or what have you from that point. So cameras work as spatial placeholders, if you will, that you can jump to. And when you have a complex building, it's essential to use cameras so that you can get inside the rooms and work on various interior spaces. If you have multiple cameras in your scene, then you can jump to a specific camera by selecting it in a viewport and pressing C. Now we're looking through camera 2. If I select camera 1 and then activate this viewport and press C, I will look through camera 1. If no cameras are selected, we go back to perspective here, and I press C, I'm prompted to select which camera I want to look through in this dialog box. Sometimes it's helpful to show the cone of the camera even when the camera is deselected, and you can do that right here. Say show cone, and then when the camera is deselected, this gizmo called the cone remains visible. This is very similar to the functionality in light sources. The cone will display when the camera is selected no matter what. But it can be helpful to visualize the cone when you're composing a scene. It's also possible to show the horizon within a camera. Here I'll select camera 1 and show the horizon. The horizon is visible when you look through the camera. I'll activate this viewport and press C to look through that camera. Now the horizon would be visible through the window, or if I look at the scene in wireframe view. There's the horizon line. This represents eye level. So this tells me that I'm looking down in the viewport. If I truck the view by dragging the mouse wheel, I can actually see the horizon now through the window, and that might be a more realistic type of rendering if I wanted to take it from the perspective of someone standing in the space.